And yeah, I think that's it. We are a go. My name is Kristian or Cristiano or I don't know. We haven't thought up names yet, but that's my legal name. And you
My
are,
name's
sir?
Sean, and we also don't have any nicknames yet, but you can go with Sean for now, and we'll develop it from there. Yes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll figure it out as these things happen more in depth, more frequently. We'll see. Yeah, and you are almost on your way to your PhD candidacy, right?
Oh yes,
you are
starting up in August. This guy make it through the rest of the summer.
Yeah, just Survive the Summer, which could be a good movie title. Survive the Summer.
It's in the works, actually. It's in the works.
Yeah, so you'll be perfect to break down what may perhaps be the craziest movie of all time today.
Craziest movie of all time, I think, would be an understatement. I
Yeah.
have provocative ideas on this film, and we will get to them as we go.
Yeah, and
There's a lot
so.
to this one.
Oh yeah, there's endless material to dissect and kind of swim into the bowels of, pry them open a little bit, and explore. Ooh.
Nicolas Cage's perverse acting.
Yeah. Perversion abounds. So before we do anything, let's cue up the trailer so everyone at home can get a little bit of an auditory taste. I found the word finally, auditory taste of what it is we're trying to wrestle with. And the trailer, you'll notice, like especially for us, we just watched it recently, what they're trying to do with like the music and the themes and the like narrator's voice. This summer, you'll notice. Well, it's not in the summer, but they try to make it like pass it off as like a wacky vehicle for, I don't know, just strange story exploration. But we both know this is a sham. What the trailer does is lie to put butts in seats, and we'll cover all that. I have like the IMDb gross up and everything, but here it is. Let's take a listen.
How was your weekend?
It's all right, It's nothing earth-shattering.
He was an ordinary guy.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Looking for an extraordinary love.
I'm Peter Lowe.
Rachel.
I brought this girl up to my place the other night.
It started with a kiss.
Really hot.
A very special kiss.
You wanted her very badly.
Yeah.
A kiss that could drive you mad.
I hate interrupted love affairs, don't you?
Yep.
It's affecting his work.
There you are. It's a horrible, horrible job. And you have to do it.
It's ruining his appetite.
My next appointment with you is Tuesday afternoon.
I'd like to make it sooner.
It's spoiling his sleep.
Sooner.
And don't think people haven't noticed.
Am I getting through to you? Over!
He is so eccentric.
My.
For Peter Lowe,
Oh, sooner.
that's just love
Love.
in the big city.
Don't laugh.
I'm a professional. I don't lie.
I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire!
Nicolas Cage,
The tortures of the damned!
Maria Conchita Alonso,
Shoot. Do it or I'll fire you. Do you understand? Not the floor, Alba.
and Jennifer Beals.
You're so pathetic.
Vampire's Kiss.
Strange stuff. I'll never do that again. Jeez.
Oh God. Yep.
It's actually my first time fully watching that trailer. So
Yeah.
They present it in an interesting manner. That's for sure.
It's I think it's trying to come across as like wacky late 80s. What'll he do next? But it's so far. It is that, right? But it's also so far removed from that I think the trailer's just one big propaganda vehicle to try to push this thing along.
I mean, and that's definitely something I think you see happening on a recurring level in Hollywood, where people are deliberately misled about the actual content of the films,
Yeah.
obviously, for marketing purposes. But I think this is precisely part of the genius of the film, in that it can be kind of seen on two levels. Like, like any good religious doctrine, there's an esoteric and an exoteric level. And
Yeah.
on a literal level, what's the trailer giving you? It's this wacky 80s nonsense. Watch what Nicolas Cage is going to do next. Him screaming at all of the things, the eyes, everything there is. And
Crazy eyes, right?
I think, the crazy eyes, I think, are if you have to take one thing away from this film, besides his facial expressions, contortions while he's being...
My God.
It's that scene, but eyes are there, so.
There's so many famous, like, quotable moments. The alphabet sequence, which I have queued up to, like, a little bit of the audio.
That's an interesting one that's the one to understand the film, too, I think.
God.
And just to laugh.
Yeah, what they had queued up is, I was surprised at what they did have in the trailer, like him running and screaming he's a vampire, which is so contextless, so just thrown in there in the trailer. You think, oh, maybe it'll be explained in the movie. Kind of, but at the same time, that is just like a 10-second little scene that just happens, just to give him something to do, I guess. But one thing I did want to jump into to start off with is the very first thing I noticed before any of the thematic stuff that we're gonna definitely tackle, and it's gonna take at least two of us if we don't clone ourselves and try to do some more. But is the out of place, like, do you remember the intro of the film? So basically, how it starts off is there's just all these cuts of stock footage of New York City. It's just random stock footage. And by the third or fourth one, I think, okay, then they're going to slowly pan in. They're going to show the character. But it goes on, and there's maybe like 15, 20 shots of the city for a couple minutes. It just keeps going on. And then throughout the film, in order to transition to further sections, they keep going back to stock footage, 3 or 4 shots, and then back to Nick Cage. And by the end of it, I just realized without Nick Cage, none of this holds together. Even before story, before anything else, if you didn't find the right guy to carry the weight of this insanity, I don't think it would have been driven forward at all. But let's give people an overview. What happens in the story overall?
Well, I think, and I'll let you, provide your own, gist of the
chaos.
But what I think is interesting to kind of go back to the trailer versus the film itself is that I was led into watching this masterpiece of a film without any understanding of what was going on. I went right into it. And yes, it's over the top. Yes, it's Nicolas Cage being absolutely ludicrous. But at the same time, to me, it came off as a sort of, almost a psychological kind of thriller in the likes of many of the sort of multiple personality disorder ones you'll see that are absolutely, dominating Hollywood and TV and whatnot.
All over now, yeah.
And it's ironic now because we see that what you see in the trailer was purely the comedic aspects, that the humorous parts, but the film itself from the beginning really presented itself as that, and it's not till the end that he really kind of utterly goes insane and kind of fully embraces this "I'm a vampire" aspect, which he is awesome film.
Maybe.
But I would certainly agree that without Nicolas Cage, he is the metaphorical, cliched glue that binds this thing together. And it's very much a vehicle, it's a vessel for Nicolas Cage to go absolutely insane. And I believe I wrote it down somewhere, but I believe for the Catalonian International Film Fest, it was nominated for Best Film. And I know one other one, I think it's posted on IMDb, that Nicolas Cage's performance was nominated for Best Actor. I have to check what it was, but I think this speaks for his absolutely integral role in the film.
Somebody had to do it, because I'm looking at it now, like the IMDb stats, released 2nd of June, 1989, so we're not that far removed, almost seeing it on the anniversary of the release. And what it was is the budget was $2 million, and it only grossed $725,131 in the U.S., so did not quite make back even half of its budget, which, okay, you can see it in retrospect, like it doesn't hold up much today, except for the story, which actually surprisingly is, I think, spectacular today and kind of fresh. Yeah. But for the time, I can see maybe the it being just a straightforward story, not really a lot of action, not a lot of insane visuals, but really driven by character and plot. And it's kind of interesting because you don't really see a story like that a lot, especially you would think Vampire's Kiss, something horror, supernatural, or whatever. But basically, Peter Lowe is a literary executive, right? One of the up and ups, the upper crust in New York City, which we'll touch on for sure. And he's just having these weird relationships with women. It opens with him on a bar after all the city footage, which goes on forever. and just bringing a girl home and then talking about it the next day with his therapist. There was a bat, and he became aroused. Very.
I was gonna say, being aroused.
And then you were aroused. She keeps asking it, right? Like, the woman left, and then you were aroused by the bat. Yes. And so that happens to him. He gets all these, like, I guess, vampiric subplot elements raining in on his life bit by bit till they overtake him. And then he meets another woman at a different bar, we think. We don't know. It could all be a hallucination by the end. We're not sure.
Yes, I mean, that's another aspect I don't think we even fully touch on in this. And I think you brought up that the question of what's fact, what's fiction, what's real, what's unreal. It's absolutely blurred here. I mean, it's definitely, and this is where it really kind of fits into the sort of prototypical psychological thriller, because it really puts us in his perspective, so we're forced to kind of... But what I like, and this is sort of on a side note, is how frequently, and again, this has come back to the comedy aspect, the film undermines it, and we have the moment where he's in front of a mirror and he's like, I'm a vampire, and then there's a guy in the bathroom saying, no, Peter Lowe, you're in the crapper, or something
Teacher acting lessons home. Yeah.
Oh yes, exactly, and it's. I think this is what, again, this maybe perhaps is what caused the film to have a sort of limited success commercially, is that it was kind of playing two different roles. But I think that's sort of the genius of it, is that it goes from this sort of it's a very postmodern film in the sense that it goes up through this psychological thriller. It forces you to take it seriously, then it continually undermines its own attempts to build a serious narrative. I think that's classic kind of Nicolas Cage and whatnot in this one. So
not only his performance, but you're right, like the story and the direction and everything that's thrown at you visually, almost like pokes at you. If your intelligence isn't there to kind of grasp it or like keep track of the little inside jokes, which may or may not take like several viewings. I know for me it took me a little while to figure out if this thing was taking itself seriously, which by the end it may or may not be. But there are a lot of those moments, like you said, with the mirror. His reflection is still clearly there in every mirror he touches, but he thinks he's a vampire. So there's a lot of that going on. And one of the things that happens early on is that weird dream sequence where he gets bitten by this Rachel woman who's a vampire. And the thing that I knew looking up like the basic synopsis of the film from IMDb, it questions, is Peter Lowe's reality really just a string of hallucinations or whatever it is? So I knew that going in. Some of this stuff may or may not be happening in reality. But at the same time, when you see that first sequence and you're not sure if it is a dream sequence, you see her actual fangs kind of descend, or maybe they're there already, but they're shown to you concretely. And he does have the holes on his neck, but then the next morning he cuts himself, so immediately you're not really sure. But when I saw the fangs, I was like, okay, there's actually some vampire stuff going on in this, which raises it up a notch in my book or belt. But afterwards, it really does start to pull at its own threads, which I know we definitely wanted to touch on, like the different scenes where you're not really sure what it is that's going on, which starts with that first dream sequence.
Yeah, no, that's definitely I would agree with all those points there.
There is one thing. The second time Rachel visits him, he's about to go back, and I do want to mention something about Jackie, right, who's the other girl in his life, the first woman he brings home. But in the scene where Rachel visits him the second time and kind of pulls him away, literally by the crotch, right? Away from going on his date with Jackie to make amends with her. He ditched her on a previous occasion, which I have to talk about. It inspires me at some core level of just a horrifying, horrible inhumanity, which, you'll know what I'm talking about. But she pulls him away, and then I swear they just show the same footage of the first night they had together. And there was...
Yes, I saw that as well. Yeah.
I was like, did they run out of a budget? What's going on? They do that a few times.
Yeah. And I guess that's sort of where you come in again. It's like it really does undermine its attempts. It kind of pulls its own threads, as you said. It kind of it prevents us from taking it fully seriously, which is why I guess a sort of like a first viewing, if you really want to be critical, you say, well, the film doesn't know what it wants to be, but is this a failure, or is this, like I said, it's genius? It's kind of point of attraction. But what I think is interesting there, and we can definitely get into this later, I know we will get into this later, is that the whole Rachel versus Jackie dynamic, I believe those are the names.
Yeah.
Frequently we see that, and again, I think a surface level sort of, even a feminist kind of reading of this, he's very sadistic, he's mistreating Olga, and so on. Or Alva, excuse me.
Yeah,
but
Alva.
I think what's interesting is that, how did I forget Alva's name? The lowest on the totem pole. But Yes,
I want to quote it
what
so
I think
badly.
is
Yeah.
channeling the Nicolas Cage. But what I think is intriguing is that in the first scene he says, "You chose me," and he says that I let you in, or no, you let me in, and that she's a jealous mistress. And so we have this sort of thing where Nicolas Cage, throughout the movie, he's this kind of 1% yuppie type who's frequently ordering people around. He thrives off power. He thrives off social capital. He thrives off being at the top of the pyramid, literally. And it's curious because he literally wants to become an object, an instrument of Rachel's pleasure. And of course, we can get into the thing of Rachel being a creation of his mind.
Right.
I think it's definitely something interesting. In addition to the fact that they recycle films, as you mentioned, which I had almost forgot about.
It was so when the cab driver pulls up to Alva's home, I thought for a second they switched the actor who was the taxi driver from arriving there and heading back into the city for a moment. Then I had to rewatch it. But there was a lot of things like that where you're right. You almost can't tell thematically or practically the way it was executed what they were really going for and what was accidental, what they really weren't paying attention to that makes it comedic. But there was one thing, if we can get into some scenes here, one thing that I noticed that I wanted to bring up for some sick reason. I don't know why. It really spoke to me, and I think this is kind of a very baller thing to do in a horrible way, in the worst way. Baller is a stupid word, but
baller. No.
Yeah, it's very academic. I find. But he's standing with Jackie in the art gallery, right? And they're looking at all the different pictures, and this is why this movie is so quotable and hilarious. That it has these just gem moments. On a whole, it's okay. It runs well. It has a comedic tone somewhere in there. You can pull it out. But I think it's the moments that really make it shine as a whole. And this one is I had it marked down. Yeah. So they're looking at the paintings, and she asks him, "Well, do you like it? Are you interested in it?" He doesn't miss a beat. He just keeps looking straight ahead and turns a little bit to her and says, "I got to take a piss."
Oh yes. That scene right there. Yeah.
When he did that, I wanted to give him a thug card or something. I don't know what the kids do these days, but that was brilliant. And then he sees if she's watching him leave, and then he bails out of the emergency exit. Then she calls him on the phone and says, "Oh, you don't effing do that to people, F you," all this stuff, and hangs up on him. Never want to see you again. And
I think we need one of those little counters that pops up in the corner of the screen. Thug cards, you can keep track of. That's one thug card. I think,
yes.
Because he's going to get some more thug cards as the film goes on. However you want to phrase it, he's going to get some...
almost right away, right? He's lying on the couch when she gives him that call, and there's a very interesting Illuminati pyramid over his head, on his desk table, which is never referenced again in a chessboard on the table. It's very, symbolic, maybe. And she tells him that, and he's just sitting there, with his arm over his head, and he's just listening to the message. And then he says, "Yeah, well, F you too, sister." And then they just move on. I don't know. There's these small, stupid, quotable things that, for me, really make those moments. I don't know if you had a couple of those.
Oh, I mean, there's so many moments off of the top of that I can think of, not off the top of my head, but I think I think that scene you mentioned in particular is, I think, because in one thing I hadn't realized till I saw the trailer, earlier, is that they really they frequently kind of brought up the notion of love and the kind of question of love, and that came up a lot too when he's with his psychiatrist and whatnot. Yeah. Which is why, again, I think it is this kind of thug moment where it's on a surface level, Jackie's the perfect person for him. She's successful and so on, and yet he continuously finds himself drawn in a kind of perverse way to Rachel and to his own kind of destruction. And I think you can read this on numerous levels. You can read it on a sort of moral, spiritual level. I mean, especially when you have the sort of creepy occult symbolism and imagery there. And that's a level we can even get to, and her literally draining his life force, kind of sending him on this very dark trajectory. I mean,
succubus
on a psychoanalytic level, there's numerous readings, but we can get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, there's one scene I know we definitely wanted to address here, and I have it queued up, is the alphabet scene. And I think there's so many people who haven't ever watched the film, but they know this scene because of internet memes or what have you. It's kind of everywhere on the internet, and I just wanted to play it because if you haven't watched it, it's a treat. It's magnificent. So here it is, and I'm sure we'll have enough reactions to this to kind of pull at some other threads. But this basically characterizes his relationship with himself, because even the therapist, I don't think, gets through. He's just there to talk to himself. Yeah.
Very narcissistic. Yeah. I have an interesting reading on this film, so I'd like to see yours, and we'll get right to it.
Yeah, let's hit it. So here goes that alphabet scene.
Shouldn't the copy be in that file? It should, right?
Yes.
Right? Yep.
Unless, of course, it's somehow been misfiled.
But misfiled?
Yes, misfiled. Sometimes somebody puts a document in the wrong file and then it's misfiled. It makes it much harder to find.
Who? What do you mean, who? How could somebody misfile something? What could be easier? It's all alphabetical. You just put it in the right file, according to alphabetical order. A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Peter.
H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P,
Peter.
Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Huh?
Wow.
Man.
Yeah, so that's a small taste of the many wonders of this delightful film.
I think that scene really does sample the madness of the film right there. But yes, it's something.
So this is him basically, I guess, demonstrating for one of the first times to the audience his inability to get simple things that don't work for him, right? If anything doesn't work for him, it's just unquestionable. And then he asks her, I think immediately after this, how do you not know who misfiled it? You call yourself a therapist, like as if that has, or psychiatrist, right? As if that has any bearing on what's happening in his office.
Of course, yes. A simple evidence of him projecting all this onto her and so on. And they set you up for that, but yes, certainly.
Yeah. So this brings us, I think, into his relationship with Alva, who, oh my God, like the Mother Teresa of this film. She just carries such a big burden. This is, I think, illustrative of him not understanding people's failures, but there's something different with Alva. I wrote it down too, there's no setup for why he tools on her so much, why it is he makes her life such a living hell. And I thought maybe that's something we could touch on. The film doesn't explain his motivation for that or their history, but it's just a tool or a vehicle that maybe is just there, but I think it's doing a little more than that. If we wanted to.
No, I think, and I think we won't draw too much into this, but I think you cannot watch this film without comparing it to American Psycho. Excellent. Novel film and whatnot, especially in its kind of portrayal of this '80s Wall Street yuppie culture and sort of his this disdain towards everyone. And I think it's really what I think is interesting is that this film came out in 1989, so it's really in the tail end. It's really still part of that era, which potentially could sort of whereas the novel American Psycho was written in 1991. I'm just taking a look at my notes here, and I'm not sure when the film was, but I think it was a couple years after that, or 8 years after that, or something.
Like mid-late 90s, mid-90s.
Yeah, something like that. So I think in these scenes in particular, we kind of definitely see this sort of this, and the film is poking fun at it because it's like they're presenting him as this evil executive and he's just going on and yelling at his employees for no conceivable reason, as you mentioned. The film presents no reason why Alva, other than his other, I think this has also become a popular meme. I've been led to believe the other scene where he says, "You are the lowest on the totem pole. I can do whatever I want to you, or else you will be fired, Alva."
You have to do it.
This scene, I think, is another one that is. That really captures that.
Yeah.
But what you go now?
I was gonna say I have some of the Alva stuff queued up. It's I don't know why I pulled up like this short compilation and I queued it up to that section and just listening to a lot of it. I don't know if we could play it. There's just a lot of it there that the scenes go from 0 to 100 every time it concerns Alva. And toward the end of the film, he starts doing this thing over and over. He has the cycle of kind of not forgiving, apologizing. There's my English, right? Apologizing to her, kind of coaxing her into forgiveness and this kind of zone of comfort. Oh, are you sure, Mr. Lowe? Yeah. Oh, I was out of my head. And then a couple seconds into luring her into that trap, he just destroys her worse than he ever has before. And one of those is she eventually, right, the abuse and torment gets so bad, she calls out sick from work. And he goes and he actually visits her in her home.
His apartment, yeah.
he calls up his secretary. Where's Alva today? Oh, she called out sick, Mr. Lowe. Sick. Goes a little mental, and then he goes and visits her at her home, and like peers through her windows while she's like ironing her clothes, and they have that talk. She confesses she wasn't sick. She couldn't find the file, didn't want to face him again. Says, oh, forget about the file, forget about this. Lures her into the taxi, and then brings her back. And in, I guess, a matter of hours or something like that, she finds the file eventually. He's like abused her some more. And then we have the chase sequence, the attempted rape, and then this reminded me of you and other movie scenarios is when he finally, spoiler alert, this whole thing, I guess the spoiler alert, watch the movie before you watch this, like this far into this, but he puts the gun into his mouth and continuously like pulls the trigger, which they did that with practical effects too. I was on a visual level of production, I was surprised. Nothing digital. They actually, like, the smoke goes off, everything, and that reminded me of Fight Club. Fight Club a little bit, and I think that's a good place to kind of, if we want to talk a little bit more about this, but also lead into that psychological aspect of his dual consciousness, right? Because in Fight Club also, the only way to stop it is to pull the trigger, but I think this movie negates even that possibility. Pulling the trigger solidifies his false reality and false character.
It allows him to further continue his delusions because he's so utterly misguided that he thinks it's a real gun, and so he shoots it, and now he runs around with this false aura of invincibility. And I think in line again, we can get back to Fight Club, but in line again with American Psycho, what I think is ironic, another parallel between the two films is that he's running around the city doing absolutely insane stuff, particularly the end where he's just walking in the streets with his completely disheveled blood down his face, and no one pays him a mind. Everybody just walks by, not even acknowledging him. And likewise, in the office, he chases people around. He runs on desks. He screams with a trench coat, and no one pays him any heed. But no, I think so that's another interesting parallel. But I think like
American Psycho at the end with the cat, right, and the gun, and the police officers, everything, right. He's not even sure if it's a dream. He calls his lawyer.
His lawyer. I don't
therapist.
remember. It's been a couple of years from American Psycho, but his lawyer basically tells him, that
was hilarious.
Acquisitions versus mergers and acquisitions, and they keep playing on the fact that he tries to confess and no one believes him, and likewise, albeit it's in a dream sequence with Vampire's Kiss, but he confesses to a psychiatrist like, oh, I raped a woman. She's like, no, it's this little id action, and oh, I killed somebody. She's like, oh, you think people
die all the time?
It matters. I mean. And so it's really, I think it's interesting, and you bring in Fight Club too, and I think it's interesting how this film really kind of predicts in some ways the kind of themes and the ideas that come up with both of those. If I can jump in again with the notion that you said of the sort of split consciousness that we see again and again in numerous films, numerous cycle. I think Identity is a good one. There's I should have come up with a list, but there's numerous multiple personality films that are absolutely rampant out there.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is that scene there of the ABCD. To me, when I was reading it was absolutely one of the key scenes to understanding why his sort of perverse relationship with Rachel is that what, in my mind, was so outrageous to him with the files is that somebody could misfile something, that something could be out of place, that there's this sort of chaos, this disorder was utterly unacceptable to him. And the reason I would argue this is that this disorder he sees, this fact that someone could file something in the wrong place, reflects his own perverse, excessive, sort of extimate desire for Rachel, because this desire for Rachel is beyond the pleasure principle, so to speak. It's putting him in a bad location. We know it's perverse. We know it's sort of has this weird occult kind of imagery surrounding it. We know she's literally feeding him, sucking the life out of him, and yet he still finds himself drawn to her. And so we see that he's unable to come to terms with this fact that he has a sort of excessive pleasure that has no purpose. It's a stupid, senseless pleasure inside of him. And so when a psychiatrist mentions that something could be out of place, he absolutely loses it. He knows the whole alphabet. So I think, in my mind at least, this scene is absolutely key to reading his inability to kind of come to terms with this sort of perverse desire that's residing within him, that he experiences as sort of this external thing inhabiting him. So.
Yeah, and I think also it does so much on so many levels, like you mentioned it. These sort of like thought machines or psychological filter lenses that he puts on work at such a deep level that the thing he creates and that he lusts after and that he makes lusts after him, he also wants to become. Like, he wishes he had that vampire gift. in at that deep-rooted fantasy level. So that's going so deep, and then on top of that, they add the layer of in his waking life, he resents it as a curse. Like he's panicking and he's freaking out about it. Yet it's something that he wishes for, created out of a weird lustful fantasy that he also tries to escape at the same time that he's creating it and go back to Jackie. So it's really strange, and he puts the blame on the therapist, right? You call yourself a psychiatrist for not getting that or not being able to...
It's like, you shouldn't be a psychiatrist or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, just losing it. And there's something I came up with, like... There's some kind of weird juvenile and also obscenely sexualized dependence he puts on his own thought projections of women. And toward the end, when he meets Sharon, right, that projection of Sharon.
Yeah, yes, that scene is...
who's perfect, right? I murdered someone yesterday. It's a long story. I turned into a vampire. I'm not proud of it, or whatever he says. She loves all the things he does, and it doesn't even last, I think, like a minute of screen time as he's walking back to his apartment, talking to, her, his imaginary Sharon, perfect woman, that he has a fight with her, with his own imagination. He tells her to piss off and crawls under his couch. So it's so juvenile, like self-destructive, but the more it creates, the more it seeks to rebel, and the more it rebels, the more it destroys, which leads him to make new creations out of that too. And there's some, looking at some of the scenes with that, there's odd connections that happen beyond just the hallucinogenic nature of some of the stuff we're shown as viewers, is a lot of the characters are so intricately intertwined. So like his bosses are with him at the bar where he meets Rachel for the first time, and then the fantasy takes off from there. We don't know that she doesn't actually go with him, maybe. But also Emilio, who's Alva's brother, is the therapist's lover. It's shown in some scene. Yeah. When she's on the phone with him later on, he's got the vampire teeth in. He's like stroking her back behind her and like goes off screen somewhere with his shirt off. Really, really strange. And that made me question, is the therapist even real? Is this in Alva's head? What really is going on? So there is, a lot of that
it's
complex
I'm
structure.
Sure it's certain, like you said, the levels of what is reality and what is sort of a projection and a mental fiction of his and hallucination is certainly it's they set you up so numerous readings could be valid. And again, in returning to why we spent so much time with Alva, I think is that what's interesting is that while on one hand his sort of conflict between the Jackie, who seems like the ideal girl for him, and his kind of perverse desire for pain and whatnot with Rachel, it's an integral part of the plot. But for most of the scene, most of the film spends time with just him absolutely tormenting Alva, and that's kind of where a lot of the comedy comes in, because it's just so over the top, and it's continually. And I think it's interesting is that they frequently another thing I wrote down is it's interesting is that they frequently juxtapose the fact that they have him there and they have Rachel again. She's always on top. Or in distinct and blatant contradistinction to the fact that he's always in a position of power, aside from these encounters of Rachel, and she's sucking the life out of him. Yeah. What have you? A lot more than this. Lots, yes.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to him. I think the next scene is him yelling Alva about like 18 times or whatever
Alva.
it is. So yes, Alva. Well said.
Yeah.
And we see that it's this he I guess he can't tolerate being he can't tolerate being under someone else's influence, and so the second he gets back to work, he has to reassert his dominance, and this whole kind of oscillation between dominance and submission, I think, is kind of what like ultimately sends Peter down a dark slope, I think we could say. So
pickled pepper patch or something, yeah. But so let's see if we can break down maybe a couple of scenes here. I think I've got them. Yeah, so I put together a short list of all the things that the film does to make you believe he's a vampire, right? I think I came to my own conclusion by the end that Peter Lowe isn't a vampire in the film, but Nicolas Cage definitely is a vampire in real life. No question about it. And before that, I also I have it pulled up here too with the IMDb research that I've done. Apparently the accent that he did is something he did on purpose, as much as we can believe that coming from Nicolas Cage. He says he did it on purpose because he wants it to be like an obvious fake accent that the character uses to make himself sound more sophisticated. Like in his head, he thinks he should be quasi-British. But at first, I couldn't tell if it was maybe trying to be like Californian to an extreme, even though Cage, I think, is from California.
Yes. I couldn't put a read on this.
Yeah, it went British.
I'm lost on that one. It's Nicolas Cage. I think it's very singular there. It's unique.
Yeah. You don't have the files, do you? Oh, it's so weird. Yeah, and it comes in and out too. So I can see his defense that okay, it was a choice for the character. At certain times, he wants to appear loftier or haughtier than he is, but some of the things that are definitely trappings with his character like that, but also just scenes that the film is visually shooting at an audience that maybe isn't paying as much attention, which it doesn't take that much, but you can get caught up in the ridiculousness of it and fail to really, the
film sets you up, which is why, again, I think it does function on two levels there.
Yeah.
It's not saying one's better than the other, because it's an intriguing film to sit back and take the thrill ride of watching and all the nonsense.
My God. Yeah, I enjoyed both. Hey, they're fantastic. Yeah. So these are some of the ones. So one is that, okay, the neon cross at the church when he's walking back at night and he falls down and drops his groceries.
Oh, yes.
That one's there, but then also at the same time, Alva always wears a cross. And he has no problems like chasing her down, getting very close to her, no reactions to that. So that is kind of a little thread that unravels itself, maybe. Another one is that, the sunglasses, right, and the sunlight in his apartment puts everything up. But at the same time, when he has that hallucinatory end crawl with the stake through the city, it's in broad daylight, so no problems there. The vampire Rachel being in his office with Alva finally finding the file when no one could have come in or out without Alva, noticing it. So that unravels that one a little bit. The dream sequences, of course, like we talked about. The woman that he bites with the vampire teeth. That one was kind of a strange. Also, of course, the blank bullets, right, that he fires into his own mouth make him think so, but we know they're blanks. The reflections are there, even though he doesn't see them. Something's going on there, and the need to be invited in. Right, like vampires. Rachel, he has to ask her to come in. He waits outside Alva's door. He doesn't just barge in and attack her. But the thing with the vampire teeth where he murders the woman, that for me was a little bit of a strange incident because you see Rachel in the club for the first time as like a separate character, and she's both illusion, like hallucination, and the woman he met at that bar a while back that kind of remembers him. So I don't know if we wanted to touch on that scene where he actually murders a woman, and then reality and projection mix when Rachel physically walks into his life frame. That one.
I think the question of whether Rachel is a real person, because clearly I think the film sets it up that she's not a vampire. I mean, maybe we can go. I like how the film allows you to kind of it sort of suggests that yes, she isn't a vampire, but still kind of sustains a sort of gothic kind of supernatural edge to it. But that scene though there is problematic because again, I think it's another example of the film undercutting our expectations because the whole way we can go. Well, I was sitting there. Okay, simple case of projection, simple case of hallucin, blah blah blah, and suddenly. Right. We see her outside, and it completely throws it off. And what I think an interesting question that emerges there, in addition to whether she's a real character and what scenes are real, what scenes are fake, is why does Rachel reject him? Why does she? Because if this is part of his fantasy, then why is it that he wants to be rejected by Rachel? I think is another interesting question that the film poses. But that whole scene there was a bit. What would be your take on whether that scene is part of the film or whether it's another one of his wonderful mental
experiences?
Fantasies?
Yeah, yes. I would say everything outside of the club I feel like is concretely real because you can see the physical effects of him getting like tussled around and thrown around. And it took me a little bit, but as soon as he starts walking around the streets in the morning and you can still see the blood on his shirt and the newspaper with the murdered woman, I think up to there, that's all done. But when Rachel comes into the frame, she has like this dual self that he's seeing. He sees her reject him while still as a vampire in his vision. But then you also meet Donald, who's her like male, boyfriend, lover now. And he has a reaction to Cage. But as soon as he runs out to chase after her, she all of a sudden says, "Oh, Peter, right?" like it's her first time seeing him, so maybe they're both projections in his mind at that point. I'm not sure. Or he saw them in the club or something.
Yeah. That's. I think it's a jump in of my own take here, kind of jumping off yours. Is the way I see it, and I think the way that's most plausible to kind of sustain a lot of what we said so far is that Rachel here, I think she's still a fiction. She's still a projection. She's still hallucination, and that the club scene is real. The person he kills is most likely real because we see the newspaper, and unless he's hallucinating the newspaper, it seems like he really did kill somebody. And again, this could be raised, but it could be very probable that he's at a club and he's still imagining Rachel. He's still hallucinating and talking to this non-existent person. I mean, after all, we've seen that he doesn't see his own reflection in a mirror. So, and then if that's the case, and the question again to kind of return to the one I reached earlier is why, if he's imagining this, why does he want Rachel to reject her? And my question there, or my answer there, is that I think it's really in line, as paradoxical as it seems, I think it's really in line with a lot of his other behavior and actions throughout the film, because he wants to be humiliated. He wants to submit to her. He doesn't want what's good for him. I mean, that's a simple case. I mean, like, even if Sharon, he has this imaginary lover who's basically a projection of his own ideal creation. I mean, he's on a completely imaginary mirror image level right here. But the fact remains that even this relationship, as you said, it doesn't work out. She's like, oh, you can't live with me because I'm a vampire. It's like, that's too much for you. And it lasts about 5 minutes, which is why I think in the trailer they breach the thing of love. But I think that ultimately this doesn't happen. And that's why in the end of the film, Peter's always kind of has this perverse desire for Rachel, who kind of suggests this uncanny obsession of the dark underside of power and so on. And he's sort of at times repelled by it, at times drawn to it. And ultimately, in the end, he's taken fully in. And which is why in the end, again, he dies. It's not at her hands, but when he dies, I think the last lines, it's like, you're now with me, or let me pull it up here. But it's
that's a crazy scene too. Classic stake through the heart. A spoiler, of course.
Yeah, it's dream of me, my angel, dream of me. Then, God. And that's what Rachel's saying to her, and that's how he ends. So we see that even upon dying, he still does not relinquish his fantasy here, which is why if we're gonna sort of see her and we're gonna go on a crazy psychoanalytic reading here, see her as a sort of embodiment of the death drive. And I think if Nicolas Cage has read his Freud, I think he's trying to give us a reading here. And of course, what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to see what reading is underneath this one, as if Cage is trying to set us up with that, but she does destroy him in the end. That's no denying that. So
there's a lot of the psychoanalytical culture is hailed, used effectively, and at the same time kind of undermined a little bit, because he mocks his therapist, of course, and I think we get a lot of everything that's going on through his lens. And even in his own mind, that version of that projection of the therapist talks about the id and its release and how it's an okay thing for him. So he almost piggybacks off of that psychoanalytical frame to excuse his own actions and his own interpretations of events. But I made a little mock note for myself here that ultimately the film is about love, right? And true love. And as he puts it, mature, non-juvenile love, adult, right, love. And I think on a certain level he's right. That it is dealing with love, but I think, as you really clearly broke it down, it's not external love. It's more internally projected, self-manifested, self-orchestrated conceptualization of love, what he wants it to be. And it is that weird self-defeating, self-unraveling thread of whatever he establishes, he also desperately destroys and runs from. So, yeah, it's schizophrenic. Almost going back to Fight Club, of course, American Psycho. There's like that duality of self going on there. American Psycho, of course, a perfect counterpart to this, because running around
down the hallway with a chainsaw and no one does anything.
And then the next day, like wondering if he'll fit into people, with people. Yeah,
listening to Walking on Sunshine, I believe. Right. Classic scene right there. But.
Yeah. Oh my God, chopping up Jared Leto with Huey Lewis and the News in the back.
Yes, you stupid. Yeah. Wonderful scene. I think that will have to be another one for the future. But I think I would perfectly agree that this film is about love. I think there's no disputing that, and maybe I'm just a hopeless romantic. Maybe we're just reading into it, but I think this film is completely about love, and I think this film possibly you can even say that it endorses love, and it does so by providing the sort of negative example, by providing the exact opposite of what it should be. And I think if that's the case, and I think this film is a bit subversive. It's a bit in the sense that we see someone who is completely, he's unable to kind of adopt any sort of mature, non-juvenile love, as he would say, because his whole conception of, relationships, romantic, sexual, and so on, is completely influenced by these rituals of dominance and submission, and that he can never have a straight one-to-one relationship with someone. It always has to be either he's in control, he's a sadist, with Alva, he's continuously tormenting her and relishing in this sort of sadistic pleasure from it, or he's basically giving himself over. It's to use the German word Schadenfreude, pleasure and pain, or jouissance for French, both wonderful words, two languages I don't speak, but wonderful words. Pleasure and pain, jouissance, yes. And he's, again, it's either submission or dominance for him. And I think if that's the case, then what this film is showing, the subversive message, is that in his position of power, as a sort of yuppie elite, he is unable to experience love because he's been so inundated by a culture, by a society that completely thrives in hierarchy, that he's a fascist within his psyche, and that he can't conceive of any position other than up and down. And so I think what he needs to do is break out of that logic. So that's my sort of reading my thesis on the film there. But I think love is definitely central to it, and I think it's making a case for love, as paradoxical as that may sound.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a little ridiculous to talk about it, right? Because this film is about love. It sounds so cliched and so generic and simple, which this film is anything but.
And we haven't demonstrated that already.
Yeah.
Oh, Nicolas Cage does it himself.
God, yeah. He's the best. But I think what it's doing is, at a certain level, trying its darndest to come across as simple and obvious and juvenile and fake, but it's so masterful in a certain way. They can't not have known. It's like so bad that they knew what they were doing, if you were to just take it straightforward for what it is. But underneath that, there's so many layers going on. Again, the Fight Club and American Psycho links there, which this, I think, predates by quite a while, especially Fight Club. And as ironic as it is, you could take this film as like a Fight Club prototype in a certain way.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely different. Like as we said, because it continuously undermines itself. And in this sense, it's more postmodern, I guess, if you will, because it's so ironic. It's so sort of it's self-negating because it undermines all its attempts at constructing it, even having a solid interpretation. I think it's interesting how the film's continuous kind of undermining and negating of itself also parallels Nicolas Cage's or Peter Lowe's attempts at every time you think you have him pinned down, something else comes up. It's always going at it. So it's interesting, and I would definitely agree. It's a sort of a prototype. It's a precursor of those films.
Yeah, sets up that archetype of insanity, I think, which not a lot of films can capture with the enthusiasm and insane energy that this one does, and also like vulnerable authenticity. This film, as ridiculous as it is, and as like complicatedly, whatever it is, intellectual, right? It does so honestly. It knows what it is, and it takes all of its bad with its good and throws that at you. And so, like, I think to kind of close things up a little bit, or get into that realm of this breakdown, what would you say are for you your maybe top 2 or 3 scenes? And they don't have to be scenes that really capture what it's doing. They could just be for the sake of visuals or the sake of film or story or whatever it is that grabbed you, whether they deal with character or production or the story itself, and why it is you would think maybe the film couldn't do without those, or if it could do without those also.
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball here.
Oh.
After throwing out lots of analysis, lots of psychological analysis, my top 3 scenes are going to be solely for the comedy, solely for the humor.
Yep.
I love analyzing films. I'm a ridiculously corrupted person where I can't watch a film and not think, oh, what theory, what can we apply to it? What sort of hidden esoteric message is there? But in this case, on a just immediate comedic level, there's a lot to offer. So number 1, and this is in no particular order, but number 1, the part where he's in a bathroom and he has the realization. I know I've referenced this one before. Like, I'm a vampire, and the guy's like, no, you're in the crap, or your name's Peter Lowe, and it gets the perfect attempt of the film that's kind of undermining any sort of any attempt to take serious. And then my next 2, I think, would be the entire sequence where he's coming back from the club. He's having this imaginary conversation of Sharon, and again, this one's absolutely hilarious, but I think it also functions again on the psychological level that we've spent lots of time describing, and it's absolutely hilarious. It's him walking through, and what I love about it is it takes the Oh yeah.
Too good.
You might as well have acted and then film yourself. But what I think is it's good. We'll leave it at that. And then I think the final one, and it's not even comedy, is just the 80s dance club. For the 30 seconds or so we get there, I wanted to start dancing right there. I wanted to go to a club. I wanted to rave. It was
the clothing styles.
Oh yeah. It was that looked like a club to be right there. That was the place to be. I mean, murder aside, but if there's a club where there's a guy running around telling people he's a vampire, that is the spot to be. So those are my scenes right there. I would say you can't go wrong with that.
No, oh man, I think if you were to just watch the film for the comedy, it would be more than enough to stand on its own. So I would actually have to agree. My top 3 are all about the comedy, and especially the weird execution of the moment. My first one, again, also no particular order, but the first one is when he's on the phone with Henry something, right? The contract they're trying to close.
Oh, yes.
Alva, she's looking for it, and he calls her in, and she still hasn't found her. He says, "Well, you're gonna have to sit there and listen to the song and dance I'm gonna have to do because we still haven't found his file." And he calls him up on the phone, and the guy's totally chill. He's like, "Oh, take all the no rush, take all the time you want. You see that, Alva? That's your fault."
That scene is, yes.
Yeah, it breaks in, like, his exchanges with her have been so insane before that this is almost like a throwback, just comedy for the sake of comedy. Doesn't really further much of the story, but I noted it down. It's just like a classic Hollywood movie joke. Set up, payoff. He's about to chew her out, and make her sit there for the horrible, I guess, chewing out he's going to go through with this guy's contract.
Pull the rug out from under you, yeah.
Yeah, oh my God, he was so committed to it too. And then my second one, I would say, is, of course, the monologue, right, where he's talking with Sharon and everything. He's all crazy. But
what I love about that one is it takes a classic sort of like, again, the Hollywood comedy. We see, and there's so many movies where they do this, and I think another one that comes off the top of my head is the Beer Fest. It's a horrible comedy movie, but Beer Fest is a similar thing where we see the person, we see what they're imagining, and then we cut to the reality of him walking around a street just utterly disheveled. And Beer Fest is a very similar sort of effect there. It's hilarious, I mean, it's.
I'll have to watch it. Maybe they pulled a little bit from this. Maybe.
No, I'm not a historian of the comedy, right. But it's good.
Yeah, I think I like it a lot because of that back and forth that you see, his hallucination versus the reality, and the more they go back and forth, the more weight is added to the joke. And I found myself kind of resisting it at first because I was like, okay, I get what they're doing here. This movie's been hilarious. I love it, so far. But they just kept doing it, and that wore on me, like waves on a rock or something, just eroded away whatever resistance I had to it. And at the end, I was like breaking down hardcore. Just I couldn't take it anymore. And I think other than that, it would have to be the taxi ride scene all the way up until the attempted suicide rape. It doesn't actually happen. No rape in this film. Sort of. Yeah. But yeah. For me, it's that one because, like, he tricks her so many times. I thought, okay, he's going to go. Finally, he's going to make amends. It's all going to be settled. And he does it again. And I think the same thing with erosion. Yeah, it just broke me. I had nothing left.
and if we want to bring it back to this main point, that's the thing where we have the line from the taxi driver where he's like, something about love is like, you have work and you have love. Am I right?
Yeah.
Something along these lines there. And this is where he comes back of this delusion. This is when he calls up his therapist. He's like, oh, you're going to laugh at me, but I want love and so on. And it's really where this idea of love that we've been harping on first comes into the film. So yeah, it's something.
The origins of the downfall right there at the end. Other than that, what would you say for you is the biggest thing you could tell someone who hasn't watched the film to kind of lure them in? What would be the aspect of it for you that is the biggest draw, other than the breakdowns we've done of it and the different aspects of it and the key scenes? What would you say if somebody sees this film, and it is kind of pop culturally out there, it's in memes, it's in things like that, and I'm sure people watch like compilations but have never seen the actual full story? What would you say to someone like that who isn't willing to be drawn in, but knows that there are jokes in it, knows there's some funny aspects of it?
Well, I think, and I hope, that our analysis so far has shown that there is, if we're not just insane, us two, there's a little depth to this one. There's a little bit going on below the surface. But I think it's as simple as this: Nicolas Cage running around a vampire thing, screaming, "I'm a vampire" in the streets of New York. And if we have that, and then we have something ongoing, I think that's all I can make. And if that doesn't draw you in, I guess this isn't the film for you. So
have no soul. There's I would say that there's a lot to it that is almost taken for granted. Like, it is a hilarious film. The premise is insane. It's done well. It's psychological. There's a lot going on. And to just hear that, you can paint some pictures in your head, but really, this is of such a caliber of everything that it is that if you don't see it start to finish, you won't really get it. You have to go for the full ride. You can't just look at like a trailer or something of it. And I think that's what separates this movie from a lot of culturally popular films where, like The Matrix, the bullet time scenes, the resurrection scene, it has key scenes and things like this. But this movie, you could watch all the key scenes separately and miss maybe like a total of half an hour of footage in between a lot of those and not get the full experience. I think you have to be there for every grotesquely insane little beat that it goes through. And I did write down too, medically, I would recommend this for people to kind of like step outside of their comfort zone and just watch something wacky and crazy. But if you have a heart condition or like some other kind of condition, it's not for you.
Not your game. No,
yeah, unless you want to check out. I don't know. Yeah.
Stay far away.
Far away. But yeah, I think that just about does it for our Vampires Smooch session right here. Vampires Kiss, fully recommended. Sean and Kristian approved. Oh, yeah. All the way. 1 thumb up each. And that's 2. I think that'll do it. We're thinking of doing these regularly, and we'll be breaking down hopefully a lot more stuff, not just films, but we're really going to tackle a lot of cool stuff and stick with maybe things that aren't necessarily fringe, but like this, just kind of cultural PowerPoints and phenomena.
Bring in some different ideas,
Yeah.
Go a little outside of the usual, if we will.
Yeah, this isn't your normal film discussion, review, critique.
There's nothing normal about this. I think.
Nope.
That's the one thing we can walk away with saying.
Oh God, help us. Yeah, that's it. So I would say that wraps it up. And any final remarks on Vampire's Kiss with Nicolas Cage?
I've said enough.
Yeah, good. Yeah, better leave it than dig up any more trouble with this one. Yeah, so go see it.
Too much trouble to be dug up. So the second something comes out, it's game over. So we'll leave it there.
Yeah, go see it. Go watch it. If you haven't watched it, look up a compilation.
Buy your Vampire Fangs. We forgot to.
Oh, what?
So buy your Vampire Fangs.
Buy your Vampire Fangs. Yeah, we forgot to.
Completely forgot that. I had to pop them in now, but no, too late.
We'll grow them in later. It'll solve the whole thing. Yeah, so go watch it. If the sequel comes out, I think in the Bible that's like a sign of the apocalypse. I'm pretty sure of the second coming. So
strap it.
Yeah, look out for that. Strap on your teeth. Go to your local computer. Watch it. Pirate it. We're not recommending you do things, but
it's out there.
It's out there. Just find it. And happy hallucinations, everyone. And I think I'll leave you all with 10 seconds of him running through the street screaming he's a vampire. So until next time, this is Kristian and Sean in whatever this is going to be called, and this is Nick Cage running around to take us out of here, and we will see you next time. That's it. Ciao.